The Rebel Capitalist Show.
I see Build Back Better as just a rebranding of the Great Reset agenda, because they came out with that in like 2020, or it was before that, but they really started promoting it. It became popular in 2020, and they got so much pushback from the internet and just kind of all the normal people on the left and right. Like, okay, this isn't going to fly. So they kind of have to rebrand it as Build Back Better. And that's what you hear Biden and Trudeau talking about nonstop. So am I right to assume that?
Well, I think a lot of these different groups have different names for this thing.
Okay.
So the World Economic Forum's name is the Great Reset. The Rockefeller Foundation, I believe they call it the Great Transformation. And then the UN's name for it is Build Back Better. But oddly enough, back in 2010, the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum called the Global Redesign Process, which they began planning then with their Global Agenda Councils, they're called, which they have essentially for every facet of our lives, has a Global Agenda Council. Even the future has its own council with them. And those different groups have developed policy papers and policy agendas from now until like 2050 for all these different areas of society. And a lot of that is, coalesce with this 2030 agenda. That's why so many of these different groups that you see come together in manifesting these different agendas use that a point to that particular year so often. So I think they all have different names for it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm sure you read that paper by I think she was a Danish gal that is part of the World Economic Forum. She wrote that blog post about, it wasn't just you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. It was something to the effect of you'll own
rent
nothing,
everything.
you'll have no privacy. You'll
yes,
own nothing,
also.
You'll have no privacy,
mm-hmm.
and you'll be happy. And she goes, it really is just eerie in the sense that it seems like it's written like by a third grader, because they're talking about having crayons and art projects, and they don't have to go to work because all the computers do everything, and all they have to do is ride their bicycle around and color and grow plants and stuff, and that the robots bring them anything they need, and the robots can read their thoughts. And that and then she goes on in the latter part of it and talks about those people who were kind of basically pro-freedom and didn't see things the way the government saw
they
things,
like
how they have to live out in the world, in these villages, out in the woods, and then it turns into straight Hunger Games. What was your takeaway from that?
Oh, I haven't read it in a while, but for the people that think that all this investment in automation, what they more broadly call the fourth industrial revolution, all of that stuff. If you think that all these billionaires and bankers are investing so much money and time in these services, like Jeff Bezos automating Amazon, they're doing that so you can sit on your ass and paint all day and grow plants and like just have fun. You're totally deluded. That's not why they're doing it.
So why are they
at
doing
all? Well, essentially, there's a couple different reasons why they're doing it. One, from the perspective of someone like Jeff Bezos, it's a lot more profitable, right? Because you don't have to worry about, all these Amazon workers are trying to unionize, and we have to increase our wages, and we have to worry about their complaints about wanting health care. In the past couple of years, there's been a surge of movements, not just in the US, but other countries as well, with workers demanding more, but we've seen it in the US more recently, for sure. And obviously, the people at the heads of these corporations like Amazon, which is just the easiest example to use because it's like such a monopoly. In a lot of ways, look at that and they're like, oh, we don't like this. So it's much easier for them to invest in the upfront cost of a robot that does the same work as, potentially several people, a couple people. And then just, have to pay for maintenance costs instead of having to worry about all these unknown, variables that a human employee has for them. And it's also, it doesn't complain. There's a lot of different things you could have there. It's also, all interconnected, all automated. It reduces, you don't really need human involvement for some of these tasks at the end of the day, essentially.
Yes, that's so where I take that in my head, because I always tend to see things through the lens of macroeconomics. And there's so many unknowns out there as far as the entities we're referring to, the global elite, World Economic Forum. But if you read what they say, the conclusion you have to draw is they're, at the very best, they're central planners. At the very least, these people are Marxist. At the very least, And so then from an economic standpoint, you say, okay, well, they look at Russia and say, well, what went wrong with communist Russia? Well, they didn't have something called price signals. So they can't allocate scarce resources with alternative uses efficiently. But if they have a central bank digital currency, let's assume, so all those transactions are in the same centralized database in real time, and they have that artificial intelligence that they talk about so much in the fourth industrial revolution. Now, all of a sudden, to your point, the robots or the artificial intelligence can go ahead and crunch this data and allocate those resources for us so we can take control of those resources. We can have the means of production owned by the central planners and the governments. We don't have to have prices. We can let the artificial intelligence and this fourth industrial revolution give us the technology we need to really move into this socialist utopia. From a Marxist standpoint, do you think there's any merit in that, or have you thought that through?
Well, here's the catch. Artificial intelligence doesn't work as well as they say it does, and
Okay.
they know that. And so their plans hinge on so much running almost exclusively on artificial intelligence because they want to control so many people.
Right.
So few people want to control so many people. They need to have some sort of automated system to do that. But a lot of their algorithms have very not great accuracy. Right. And so the problem with that becomes, oh, well, then that means our system won't work the way we want, and it won't, they need it to get better. Essentially what they want to provoke is what they call the singularity, which is like super intelligent artificial intelligence that surpasses human intelligence and is sort of like these people sort of view it as a god. Essentially, if you read a lot of the artificial intelligence like researchers, they sort of view it that way, but they haven't been able to trigger it. Right. So if you look more deeply into the writings of people like Klaus Schwab, who came up with the name Fourth Industrial Revolution, it's not just about automating stuff. It's also essentially about changing what it means to be human as well, in the sense of sort of merging us with the robots and the machines to an extent. Obviously, that involves lots of new opportunities for control, surveillance of thoughts, like that Dutch writer, member of the WEF, alluded to, but also other people that speak frequently at the World Economic Forum. Yuval Noah Harari have essentially said this, that we are at the precipice of the age of digital dictatorships. He said this at the 2020 Davos annual meeting, and essentially called on everyone in the room there to create that reality. It's a very
and also, Whitney, the Internet of Bodies. Do you want to explain that?
Well, that's essentially what this is related to. So essentially what Yuval Noah Harari says in that speech, and I would encourage people to go look it up because it's very disturbing. He says we're no longer human beings with a mysterious soul. We're now hackable animals. And at the point that we start wearing, he's saying this to the World Economic Forum. So, I mean, consider his audience, right? But he says essentially, with the rise of wearables, which is coming, we've seen it promoted pretty heavily, that will allow government surveillance, not just of what goes on outside, in the exterior, but also what goes on inside your body and in your thoughts. And once that happens, we pass into this whole age of digital dictatorships, and this whole thing with the wearables is also tied sort of to the Internet of Bodies, sort of like almost a hive mind perspective on our, not only will, your body be tied to the cloud through the wearable, but it will be linked to all the other people whose bodies are linked to the cloud. And isn't that great and whatever? I mean, it's very matrixy. And the fact that we've had just in the past month and a half, if you are a follower of tech news headlines, an explosion of mentions of the so-called metaverse. I don't know if you've been following this, but Facebook recently, for example, has announced their rebrand from a social media company to a metaverse company. And essentially the metaverse is like the Matrix. It's existing in an alternative reality that is entirely virtual reality. While you're wearing the Oculus Rifts and you have these like dumb little circles in your hands. I mean, obviously that technology, they plan to have that evolve with time, but they want us to spend more and more of our time in that space. And I think that's why there's this also explosion in interest among some anyway, for NFTs. To sort of start, I would argue, just because it's so convenient for them, that a lot of the hype is probably manufactured around NFTs. That's my suspicion anyway, because it's creating interest in owning things in the metaverse and spending more time in the metaverse and buying objects that you can only use in the metaverse and you own there. And all of this stuff. So I think maybe that's an interesting way of looking at it in the context of this heavy promotion of these virtual reality things. I think that's only going to pick up with time.